Hello, and thank you very much for tuning in or watching or however you're consuming this No Distance Records podcast. And my name is Owen and joined by Alan. Hello, Alan. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Owen?
I am not too shabby. So this podcast, this series that we're doing is basically we wanted to speak to people in the music industry at various different things, record label people, promoters, people in bands, people who are just starting out, people who are at the end of it. And the guy we got today is someone that you know very well, Alan. Just talk us through how you know Jason.
Yeah, so Jason is a mixing, mastering engineer, producer, studio owner. And I first met Jason several years back. I was looking for someone to mix a record, and he mixed my debut record. And then we went on to make my second album, which is where we worked a lot closer together. We were actually in the studio kind of eyeballing everything together, which was an amazing experience. And he's made so many great records with so many great artists.
Yeah, it's a really good interview. We talk about, with the range here, we talk about him playing for the Prince of Cambodia. We talk about the super DJ scene of Amsterdam. We talk about the fact that he's managed to build a studio 1 minute from his house. And the other thing that you get from this is just, not only how he loves music, but how he thinks that music now is basically, it is the best time ever for rock and roll and for music as far as he's concerned. And here's the interview. Okay, first of all, I never met Jason. I've heard lots about Jason, but this is the first time I've seen Jason. Now I know what you look like. Well, no, did I meet you? Didn't I meet you at a gig in Victoria? Was that right, Alan? In
Yeah, Kundalini Genie gig.
Yes, we did.
Right.
That's right.
That's what I remember.
I was really drunk that night. So.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't leap in to correct me when I said that we hadn't met, but actually it turns out we have. So, Alan, why don't you talk us through how you know Jason and why we wanted to speak to Jason for this podcast?
So I think I first met Jason 4 years ago. Has it been 4 years, I think?
Oh, yeah, it's about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I was looking for someone to mix an album that I'd done during COVID. And luckily enough, I found Jason, which was all a bit odd because I'd never kind of reached out to someone before, which is where I met Jason. And then we went on to make a second album, which Jason then produced. And we went into the studio to do that, which was amazing experience. So yeah, that's kind of how we met, wasn't it, Jason? I guess.
Yep.
And we have loads to ask you about you and your studio and your history. And we thought it would be a good starting point to perhaps touch on Cambodia to start with. So I know you were out there and you were involved in a band called the Cambodian Space Project.
Mm-hmm.
How did you end up in Cambodia? How did you end up in that band? And kind of what was your role in there?
Kind of random. Yeah. How did we end up there? My girlfriend and I had gone traveling. That would be about 2012, and we'd kind of I'd been playing in bands in Amsterdam. We were living in Amsterdam for like 12 years before that, so I'd been playing in bands. I'd been recording a lot of stuff. But it was mostly like for myself and the band that I was in and friends and things like that. I wasn't doing it for other people. And really my thing was just being a guitarist. So we'd been wanting to go traveling for a long time. We finally did, kind of went around the world, which was an amazing experience. And we got to Southeast Asia, totally fell in love with it. And kind of came home. And we're like, don't want to be here. At the time, we were kind of thinking of leaving Amsterdam anyway. And we're actually looking at Brighton of all places. We're like, we would really like to move there. A bunch of friends of ours lived there. We'd spent a lot of time there. So we came home, went down, spent a month there. And I don't know if it was, I think it was just like this feeling because you'd been away for so long. But we couldn't settle. We just couldn't settle back in the UK at the time. And we decided just to go back out to Asia. Went out there, went to Cambodia one time, travelled through. I was walking up the street and I saw on this kind of back street in Cambodia. I saw in a little town called Kampot. I saw this vinyl record box kind of outside, and it said vinyl records for sale, and I was kind of random. So I went up and I was starting to look out, and it was brilliant. It was like, I remember that I was wearing was a Velvet Underground t-shirt at the time, right? And I'm looking through the records, and the guy came out and he was like, you're a Velvet Underground fan. And he starts looking through the records and he found a couple, and he was like, do you want to buy these? And I was like, well, I'm traveling, there's no point in So I didn't buy any, but got talking to him, and it turned out he was a guitarist for Cambodian Space Project. And we just hit it off, Julian from Australia. The two of us really hit it off, and the rest of the band are all Cambodian. And it felt as if he'd been looking kind of for someone else to be a part of the band with him. We ended up having to come back home to the UK, had like family issues we had to come back for. And then I got a phone call, and it was, we're over in the UK just now with the band. Do you and Gillian, my girlfriend, do you guys want to join? And we're like, yeah, what are you doing? And we're like, we're playing Glastonbury. So we're opening Glastonbury, we're playing the WOMAD Festival, we're playing Jazz Cafe in London, etc., etc. It was a full tour, a brilliant tour. And we were like, yeah. And we just thought we were going on the road. We were like, yeah, why not? We'll go with you and we'll travel for a month. And he was like, well, I'll need to send you all the songs that we're going to play. And I was like, why? And he's like, because I want you to play. And I was like, wow, okay. So I practiced basically the whole back catalogue, totally fell in love with the band, and that was it. I went on the tour with them and pretty much joined the band from there, and I was with the band for 4 years. So yeah, that was really cool. We went back out and lived out there. We actually ended up living in Vietnam, and we were traveling back and forth, kind of touring. We did loads of tours in Australia and the US and around Asia, and yeah, it was an amazing time. And it was actually during that we went in to record the last CSP album, Spaced Out in Wonderland, in an amazing studio in Siem Reap, 60 Road Studios. And we were working with the producer Jim Diamond, who had done a couple of records with the band. He produced the first White Stripes albums. He did. Oh, wow. He worked with the Sonics, produced a few of their things. Played in a great band called the Dirt Bombs. He was one of the folk that had kind of worked with Sixto Rodriguez and put all the Sugar Man album together and everything. So an amazing guy from Detroit. And when we were in recording the record with him, I was like, look, I've done loads of recording, done loads of stuff on my own, with my own bands and things. And he kind of really involved me in the process of recording that record. And that was it. I was just like, this is what I want to do. And I'd been doing it for years. I mean, I'd been recording for probably 15 years before that. But as I say, never for something else. It was always for myself. So doing this with the band, it was just like, that was me hooked. I was with the band and kind of trying to take on as much as I could at the time, and started working with bands out there, because it's an exciting place to play, and to kind of make music, because everything's new. Like I love being back in the UK and I love being in Europe, but we've seen it all, you know what I mean? We've done it all so many times, and you're always pushing to try and kind of create something new and be innovative and make your music exciting. But there, it's just easy. It's like doing anything rock and roll is it's new and it's fresh, and everybody's like, wow, this is so cool. So everything's just great. Every band's really excited. Everybody that goes to see music. And yeah, did loads of stuff out there, and yeah, it was an amazing time. One of the best times of my life. I absolutely loved it.
You've obviously had a good education there, haven't you? With a guy who's done the White Stripes and the Sonics and Rodriguez and the Dirt Bombs. I mean, if you're going to learn, that's a good place to start, isn't it?
I know, and Jim's amazing. We were so many strange things. He came and toured with us, and we did the album, and then we did a tour And really strange things happened with that band. We ended up playing a gig, myself, not even a gig. We got invited. Our singer, Shanti, who unfortunately that's why the band ended. She died in a car crash. When we were there, she would get all these requests to go and play for people and sing for people because she was really she was quite an icon within the country. And she couldn't make it on this one night, and we get this phone call, and we were in our manager's place, Tony, guy from Texas, and he was like, "That right? We've got a call. We've got to go and play for the Prince of Cambodia." And I was like, "What?" and Shanti couldn't make it, so the rest of the band were away doing other stuff. So myself and Jim, we were sitting having a drink. Myself, Jim, and Jillian, we were drinking in Tony's. And it was like, we need to go just now. So we're looking at shirts and things like that. We can't go and see the Prince of Cambodia dressed the way that we were. So we're looking for shirts, and we put things on, and we went down there to kind of just rocked up to the place, and we went into the back of the palace, and they took us down into this room, and it was weird. It was like the king had a huge room that he'd made out for watching films and things like this, but it seemed really quite shady. We walked into this place and we're like, so we about
watching films and doing what else down there? Yeah,
no. It was like all these girls everywhere, and we were like, this is a weird place. And we went in, and there was a prince, and it's just this kind of playboy prince. But he had all members of the government and things like that down with him, and they've converted this room now. They're into playing music, so they were all jamming. They were playing House to the Rising Sun and all this kind of stuff, and weird things. And it was oh, come on in, you've got to play for us. And the two of us started jamming with them, and they were just giving us loads of drink. It was a really crazy night. It was one of those bizarre things that happened. So yeah, after that, me and Jim had a really good bond, and he helped me.
Wait, is that one of those moments when you're in a room like that, and there's the prince and members of the government playing House of the Rising Sun, that you look at what you're drinking and you go, am I imagining this? Is this a magic milkshake I've had here?
Yeah, exactly. It's Cambodia, so what am I smoking? It was good fun. It was a good night.
Wow, what an experience.
Amazing.
Oh,
so were you mixing for the Cambodian Space Project, or were you just kind of helping with the recordings?
I helped with the recordings, and then I mixed on that last album. I mixed 10 of the songs, and Jim did 2 of them. He did the 2 singles, and then I mixed the rest of them. So yeah, that was really cool. It was great.
Yeah, that band's actually one of the reasons why I started tapping you up, because when I was looking for a mixer, I saw that you'd mixed the Cambodian Space Project, and I'd bought some weird CD. I think it was a psychedelic guide.
Yep.
A rough guide to psychedelic Cambodia.
Yeah.
And so I'd been listening to you before I'd actually met you, which is
amazing.
I thought it's a good job I didn't try and rip it off. Can you mix this? I've already done that. Yeah.
That's a brilliant album. It's an amazing record.
It's really good record.
Really cool stuff. If anybody's never checked out the music of what the Cambodian Space Project were all about, was trying to revive the kind of lost music and the lost psychedelic music from the 60s and 70s before the war in Cambodia. When the Khmer Rouge came in and took over, they wiped out all forms of art form and music and everything like that. So the country took 20 odd years to kind of recover from this, and nobody was trying to do that music, and all the records were lost and everything like that. So people were starting to find records and tapes up in attics that they'd managed to hide. People started hearing it, and records like that came up. There's a brilliant record called Cambodia Rocks, and you can get it on Spotify, and you can get bootleg CDs of it. I've never seen it on vinyl. And it's all these tapes that a couple of people had found in Cambodia, and they'd put it all together, and they found all the kind of classic singers, and they were just amazing. It's insane guitar playing, and it's just it's great. It's like kind of wild alien rock and roll. And our whole thing was to try and do those songs, but also not just redo it, like try and make it relevant to now. So we were writing a lot of our own stuff, but trying to do it in that style, and it was an amazing experience. It was cool.
Yeah,
the thing I loved about it was we would tour like Australia or America or wherever, or come to the UK and play festivals in the UK, and the singer didn't sing in English, and nobody questioned that. And it's like there's lots of bands now that I'll listen to, like whether it's Kikagaku Moyo or something like that, who are a brilliant band, who will sing in a foreign language. And I don't know if it's because of this that I don't think twice about it, but it's quite strange. Like, you would be able to relate, and people would, as if they understood what you were singing about. And I never even knew what we were singing about. It's like, I toured with that band for 4 years and recorded and mixed all these songs, and you're like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about, because it's not an easy language.
But to be fair, most guitarists don't listen to what the singers are singing about anyway, so I don't think you're missing much there.
Exactly. So it must be something about just the music and the emotion behind it was universal. It was like you knew what it was all about, even though you didn't have a clue what it was about.
There's a lot of world music like that. I have no idea what's going on half the time lyrically.
Yep.
But the vibe is there, like the voice is there.
Yeah. And the melody.
Right. You get the gist. You kind of get the gist of what they're doing. Yeah.
If anything, it makes it even more special because you're not just being won over by a really clever hook or a lyric that just gets you. It's like if it gets you without understanding what it's saying, then there must be something good behind it.
Yeah. So after the Cambodian space project,
Mm-hmm.
how did you start mixing for others? So you kind of done a lot for yourself, you've done a lot in Cambodia, but when did you kind of branch out and start mixing other people's stuff?
It was probably, I started doing a lot of things because I'd done that album with the Cambodian Space Project. I got quite a few bands got in touch with me wanting to do things. So at the time, I was still staying out in Vietnam. So I was kind of working with bands whilst I was still in CSP. And then in Europe, I had a couple of bands. I started working for a band called Dark Horses, who had recorded an album or an EP. This is weird as well. I'm even referencing this one because it never appeared. And they recorded an EP at Anton Newcomb's studio from Brian Jonestown Massacre.
Yep.
And they went over to Berlin and recorded these songs. I loved them. I thought they were amazing. I was like, these are great songs. Mixed them and they absolutely loved them, and they never got released. And
how come they never came out?
I haven't got a clue. Don't know. I think there was discussions and arguments about how it had all been created. Nothing to do with the mixes,
right.
like at the time. And I know that it had been a very strange experience for them recording it, and they'd held on to these recordings for a few years, and then they got me to work on them. But even once I'd finished them, they still never materialised, and they've had an album since as well. And I actually need to get in touch with them because they should.
we should make a podcast trying to track them down.
I know I'd completely forgotten about that until we started speaking about it. But I just started working on so much at that time, and I came back to the UK for a break. Came back over here whilst we were still with the band, actually, and I was over here at the time that I was actually overstaying with family in Scotland when we got the news that our singer had been in the accident. And so I had to go back out. We were obviously going back out to Asia to kind of deal with everything that had happened there. But during that time, I'd been to loads of gigs and been to see a few bands. And it was one of the bands that I work with a lot still today, the Kundalini Genie. I saw them and absolutely fell in love with them. I was like, wow, they're amazing. I need to work with them. And kind of approached the lead singer, Robbie, and we agreed to kind of work together on the album that they were doing. So I helped them. I went into the studio before we went back over to Asia, recorded the vocals and the drums with them for their second album, You're the Resurrection. And we we went back over to Asia, and then I mixed that whole record in Vietnam, and it was a really weird experience because that was the first proper full record with a band that weren't close to me, like that weren't in the same country, and it just went really smooth. It was, and this is before COVID. It was quite weird how well it worked. Like we were just messaging each other, and I was doing the mixes and sending mix revisions and talking throughout the night, and it kind of worked out good because I was a real night animal at the time, and I think probably as well because of the heat. It's so hot over there, especially in summer, that you're awake all night and you kind of sleep through the day because it's too hot to be outside. It's like 40 odd degrees. So you'd be awake all night, and I'd be working on mixes and things like that. And obviously that then kind of figured out that as I'm working, Robbie was up and he was at home, and we were just messaging each other about the music. And that went so well. It went absolutely great. And that was another kind of the next big springboard, because people loved that record and loved the work that I'd done on it, and that really opened
my favourite one of theirs.
It's a great record. It's a fantastic record. Absolutely love it, and that just opened up. It was crazy how much that kind of made people aware of what I was doing, and yeah, it just kind of went from there. Came back to the UK, and a couple of years later, it was strange because I was talking about COVID. It's like, even before COVID, I was doing other records. Again, the Kundalini Genie. So I'd done a bunch of other records by this point, but then did their next record, It's All in Your Head. And at the time, we were traveling through Thailand, and we got this kind of situation where we could look after someone's house for a month in Bangkok. So and it was roasting again. It was so hot. It was crazy hot. So I mixed that whole record on headphones at the swimming pool, which was really fun. So now every single time that I listen to that record, I listen to it and I hear all the like errors that have been made because I'm doing it on headphones, but also I really like the record because it reminds me of where I was. and every single time I hear one of those songs, all I can straight into my mind comes sitting at this swimming pool, which is a really weird, bizarre place to mix a record. That I wouldn't recommend anybody tries. It was a nightmare doing it, actually. But it was the only situation I had. And yeah, weird. But then you got into the whole COVID situation, and suddenly, because I'd been working with bands remotely, suddenly that's the way that the whole world worked. And it was like, I think, did we not do your first record during COVID?
I'd written it and I was panicking because COVID was. I thought COVID might end by Christmas, so I thought if I don't do it, I'm never going to do it. And I think you mixed. I got the drums back that Christmas we were locked down for, and then I think you mixed it. I think by the time it come out, we were out of.
Okay.
Yeah, because it came. I remember when it came out because I remember you made that album without telling anyone. So a bit of background, Alan and I had been in bands over the years of various incarnations and stuff, and then we just I sort of stopped doing music, and Alan sort of did, and then one day he just went, "Oh, I've done an album." We're like, "Oh, is it finished?" So, yeah, no, it's finished, it's done, it's on Spotify like tomorrow. And we were like, "Oh," and he hadn't mentioned anything about this at any point, and we were like, "Oh," and then he came out with this really good album, and it made me really angry that it was so good, and there were tracks in there, and I was going, "Why didn't you? Where were these tracks when we were in a band together, you selfish git?" Like,
saved them all up, didn't I? Yeah,
saved them all up for your own stuff. Yeah,
but I think lots of people did that in COVID and were looking for someone to mix, weren't they? So I guess after COVID, then I guess more of the producer roles probably come into play now, hasn't it?
Yes, I mean, I was putting so much work into mixing. That's where I really got. Probably spent like 3 years of mixing just permanently. Did so many records that I was mixing, and I was back in Amsterdam at that point. So you had COVID, so you were locked down. Amsterdam was a notoriously shit music scene. It's horrendous. It's a great place to go. It's a great place to hang out. It used to be amazing when we were there in the early 2000s. The music scene was phenomenal. It was just great. But it just died a death. It's really bizarre for such a city that you would imagine would have a brilliant music scene.
I went there a few years ago, and we went to go watch Supergrass, so it was like an organised gig, but there was no bands anywhere, all DJs.
Yeah, it's all DJs, and it's because, I mean, the Dutch had the whole kind of superstar DJ thing, and like the massive, huge DJs, loads of them all came from Holland, and it's really cool. Like, they kind of got to where they are because the Dutch government were helping them, and they put loads of funding in, loads of like public money and lottery money and things like that all went into kind of helping develop the whole electronic music scene. And if that's your bag, it's like there's nowhere better than Amsterdam for it. It's amazing, because they've got the whole infrastructure there now. But they got rid of all the venues. They got rid of like everything and replaced it with clubs, which is cool, totally cool. But it's a shame because you didn't have that balance anymore. And you've got like a couple of great venues like the Paradiso and the Milkveg, but you only get touring bands that come through, Supergrass or whoever will come through and play. You don't have any local bands. And when I was playing in bands in Amsterdam, there was a great like kind of rock and roll scene. It was great, like really good alternative music scene that just disappeared. A real shame. And the studio scene is very, very difficult over there. It's quite close-knit, which is fine. But maybe because it's quite a small community of what is there, it's very hard to break into. So it was hard to kind of get work there. And I was coming over to the UK. So I was back and forth and flying back and forth all the time to come over and record bands here. So like going into different studios, and which was great. It was totally cool. But then the last time I came over and went up to record up in Stornoway, up at a guy's studio, Callum Buchanan, Lost Volcano Records. He's got a studio up there, and it's amazing, in the middle of nowhere on the island. And we just escaped for a week, and I was recording the Charlie Clark album, who's the singer from Scottish 90s band Astrid, or early 2000s band. And we did a great record. It was fantastic. But then COVID kicked in, like, whilst I was over there. And it was at that point that we decided we were going to come back to Scotland, but then COVID kind of scuppered that. So we had to wait another couple of years. So it was kind of, I had this in my mind. So I was just mixing and trying to build up all those contacts, but dying to get back into the studio when I could. And as soon as we could, we get back over here. And then it was like, it really was the last maybe 3 years. It's just been like producing like crazy. And I'm loving it. I now feel that I've got the kind of balance between, because I still love mixing, and it's a really important part of what you do, and of standing out as being able to kind of offer something individual. I think people like the way that my mixes sound, but they sound even better. Like, you'll have found that as well. I hope that when we went to do the second album, because we were actually recording it and we were working together and we're producing it, it just takes it to a different level. So it's been a long journey, but finally got to where I wanted to be, I think.
Well, I think now's a good time to mention you've done a really great playlist for us. I think it's 30 tunes of stuff that you've worked with, bands that you've worked with, tracks you've produced and mixed. I mean, there's some absolutely brilliant songs in it, as you expect. There's Cambodian Space Project on there. Obviously, there's the Kundalini Genie. There's Helicon, which is a band that we really like, and I think we've checked them out a lot. But when it comes to these things and the mixing, how much of it is you going, just absorbing what the band wants? They come, we want to sound like Iggy, Neil Young, and this, and you go, okay. And how much of it is you going, okay, I think that actually you probably sound a bit more Jesus and the Mary Chain and a bit more like that? How'd you get that balance right?
I fortunately find that very, very few bands, and it surprises me because I thought it would be different, very few bands ask you for specifics. A couple do, And usually when they do, they've got very, very, very defined things that they want, which is a bit, always disappoints me, because in one way it's a challenge, because you're like, right, well, I've got to go for this exact thing that they want to get. So that's a challenge in itself. Like, right, I hear exactly what you want. I've got to make your music sound like this. But I think that's not where the fun comes in, because I think a lot of people, and the majority, probably 95% of people, will just go, I'll give you maybe, come and see us play. That's always the best way. Like, just come and watch us. You can get a vibe of how we are. Or a lot of the time, if it's a singer-songwriter who's doing a project like you were doing yourself, Alan, where it's like, right, I want to build up something, and this is kind of from scratch. I do a lot of work like that, where you'll get songs and they might just start as acoustic songs, and it's one person that's like, right, I can play multiple instruments, and some of them I'm great at, some of them I'm not. I can play multiple instruments, some I'm good at, some I'm not. So I love that whole thing of getting together and then just building something up between yourselves, like whether that's with band or with one or two people or whatever, and really creating it from nothing. I think that's where the fun comes when you're producing, and fortunately, people seem to understand that as well with mixing. If they define it, then they may as well. I mean, that's when you're getting down the road of going, well, they're the people that are going to benefit from AI. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, make me sound like that.
Yeah.
Whereas the fun is actually that they'll come to you and go, we want you to give it your vision. And it's amazing when you do something and you completely mix it with how I hear it, and then you send it back to the band, you're like, are they going to think this is shit? They're completely different from what they had in their mind. And because surely, I mean, I've been in bands all my life. When you're in a band and you're playing, you're writing songs and you're recording them, you've got a kind of end sound in your mind. You're like, I know what I want this to sound like. So to give it to somebody and say, do what you want with it, is quite a leap of faith. But every single time that it goes back to people, folk are like, wow, I never thought I could sound like this.
Do you ever get people saying, oh, I'm not sure, and then like they listen to it for like a day and then they come back and go, oh no, now I get it? Like maybe it takes them a day or a couple of days to get it, or is it straight away?
Normally I'm being quite lucky with it. Normally it's
great.
Yeah. You'll get some strange requests. It's like you'll get, maybe somebody will turn around and they'll be like, oh, can you make me sound more like they'll be talking about their vocal. It always seems to be singers. Will come back and they'll be like, could you make me maybe on that song sound a bit more like Prince or something, right? Or somebody, right? And you're like that, but you sound nothing like Prince. You have a voice in like. So when you get requests like that, it's a wee bit weird, and you're going. But then you've got to kind of look into it and go, well, what is it they love about that person's singing or that person's song? Because they wouldn't ask you that if they knew in their heart that they can't sound like Prince. So it must be something about that particular singer. It could be David Bowie, it could be whoever, you know what I mean? That they've got something from. So you've got to kind of look into that and go, well, what is it that they're actually feeling from that? And sometimes it can be as simple as, God, they like that person's reverb sound, or they like how dirty it is, or they like how present it is, or something like that. And it's not actually that they want to sound like that person. It's just they want to get the kind of same emotion. So I think that's usually the most important thing. But I also try and always work with bands that I love. Like I'll listen to what they're doing first, and there has been a few times where I've had a couple of projects that have been sent to me and I've just been like, this isn't for me, I don't want to do it. Because yes, I could do it, and it's work, and like you're crazy to turn down work, especially these days. But if you don't love it and you don't get the feeling from it, it's like mixing and producing is a really creative thing. I've been in bands all my life and I love playing instruments, and I've never felt as creative as I am now, like producing and mixing, because you feel as if you've you've got a huge input into those songs, and you craft it and you mold it into something, and it feels a completely different level than standing there and playing the guitar to it. So yeah, I think that comes across, and people respect that, and folk must like it.
I know when Alan's second album came back and he played me Push It, and I was like, man, that guitar lead on the chorus is great. And he was like, no, Jason did that. I was like, Alan, that was sick. How'd you come up with that? Jason did it. I was like, oh, right, yeah, it's great. It's the best thing about the album. There's certain bands that you like to do, and you have to feel like you have to be engaged with the project, right? You have to like the music, right, first and foremost. You're sort of known as the go-to guy for sort of psych and garage and all that kind of stuff. Is there any genres that you particularly enjoy mixing the most? Is there any sub-genres even that you really love going, oh, good, a good 10-minute instrumental track, I love this?
Yeah, I mean, I love layers. Like, I like things to either be extreme, so I like it to be either extremely dense and extremely layered, or extremely stripped back and lo-fi. I can. It's like that's the kind of music that I love listening to as well. I don't want things to be too in the middle, because that's usually where you find that the same shit happens all the time. Whereas when you layer, I love what you can do with vocals when you really start layering them, and guitars. And it's like, I think that's something that people really know my sound as being, as that absolute wall of guitars without it just becoming like a mush. And also without it sounding overly produced and getting into kind of U2 realms or something like that, where it's all pristine. It's like how to keep it still, because rock and roll should all be about dirty guitars. Like that's what rock and roll is. It's like snare drum, great vocal, and guitars that make you feel excited. So I really try and work on building them as much as I can. And I love doing that. And that really fits in with that kind of psychedelic genre, and like kind of shoegaze genre as well. Everybody seems to want to be a shoegaze band at the moment, which
it's suddenly come really back, right? Everyone's back into shoegaze, and like,
which is cool.
It's great for you, right?
It's brilliant. I've loved it since it was ever been there. But also, it's like, I don't think that a lot of bands understand what shoegaze is. I'm hearing people saying, oh, we're a shoegaze band and we want to go for this shoegaze sound. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just like psych music. It's just good, like, dense rock and roll, you know what I mean? And the whole thing with shoegaze was all about the vocals being really buried and creating that wall of sound where things aren't actually that defined, and where you could get kind of lost in it and gaze at your shoes. I mean, and that was the whole point. It wasn't something where you were engaging necessarily with the audience. Everybody felt it as this kind of combined emotion that you were within, and you create this kind of, it's almost like being in a washing machine where you create this kind of whirl of sound and noise that everybody's within, and you kind of get lost inside. It's not about things being defined and having a hook or anything like that. And I think where a lot of people actually think that they're shoegaze or not, they're doing kind of what people are calling dream pop now, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's where it is really where it's kind of evolved to the next level, where you're actually taking hooks and taking vocal melodies that people remember, and that kind of, you don't just get lost in as this collective thing. It's like it's more accessible to more people, and I think that's a really amazing thing. I think it's an exciting thing that's happening just now with bands, and I don't think that they need to kind of reflect back can say that it's a particular genre or whatever, because all that they're doing is creating really exciting rock and roll music, which is again something that I love doing, which is all about building these layers, and that seems to be happening a lot just now with like vocals and guitars, and I think it's people will go on about how things aren't what they used to be, right? And you get, especially in the kind of music circles and like recording circles, people will go on about how amazing analog gear is and how amazing the old days were and how nobody can write a song like they used to and blah, blah, blah. And it's bullshit. It's nonsense. Of course they can. It's just that it doesn't have the nostalgia.
Yeah.
Like kind of attached to it just now. And it's like in 20 years' time, people will be saying, oh, nobody makes music like they did in 2024. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you remember the days of Garage Band and all that? Because whatever new will come after it, right?
Exactly. So it's there's people will always reflect back to something and think it was better. But at the moment, it's like it's a golden age for rock and roll. It's like, because we've now kind of understood digital technology. We've got it so that it doesn't sound shit anymore. Because a lot of the time it did, a lot of the time it wasn't particularly good. It was still quite limited and it sounded a little bit fake. Now it's amazing. And it's like you can now have the best of both worlds, where you shouldn't have to be, it has to be analog for it to sound good. It's like if the tool does the right thing, whether it's 50 years old or 5 minutes old, it doesn't matter if it creates a great sound. And I think people are now embracing that and using the massive amount of tools that we've got at our disposal. Now people can make a record in their bedroom and not just on a 4-track that might have been great and might have been quirky, but you can now make something that's phenomenal. You know what I mean? You could make a #1 record from your bedroom, and it's like that's a really exciting thing. So it's like, sorry, I'm totally going off on a tangent here about the music that I like. I think
that's kind of my next question.
Yeah, it might be exactly what I do love about music at the moment is exactly that. The possibilities seem to be infinite at the moment, and that should be an exciting thing, especially for going back to the genres that we're talking about of rock and roll or psychedelic music or whatever. Like psychedelic music, people get confused about as well. Like, what does that mean? It should be just something that opens the mind, that is mind expanding. That doesn't have to be that it's drug music. You know what I mean? Psychedelic doesn't have to be that, it only works if you're on acid. You know what I mean? It's about, does it expand your mind? Yeah. Does it make you think about something deeper and take you off on a different kind of dimension? And I think with all of us being musicians, we've all felt it on stage. You've all felt it playing in a band. Like every single time you play in a band, probably even if you play, I don't know because I've not done it, but I'd imagine probably even if you play in a wedding band, it's probably almost a psychedelic experience because you get lost in it. Yeah. Like if you're playing an instrument with other people and you're creating this magic, no matter what it is, even if you're doing a cover version, it doesn't matter. You're still doing that with other people and doing this kind of human interaction that's different from anybody else, and it's your thing. And we know how that feels. You get transported off to a different dimension, and I think that's what music should do to the listener as well, and the people that are creating it. And yeah, that's kind of what I love about music.
Yeah. No, you kind of touched on the next point, which was about the technology. Like you said, you can make a record in your bedroom. We can all, it's inexpensively, sort of. You can go and buy yourself, a decent laptop, some monitors, an interface, a few instruments, a couple of microphones, and you can make an album. Yep. So with people like you who are then helping people make album or mix records, why do you think that role is still like really important, considering we still have all of that?
It's probably
all the ability to, or all the technology to do it.
It's probably even more important than ever now, because everybody can do stuff, which means that people get lost very quickly, because also people will who do this as a hobby. You'll have someone saying, "Oh, this is just my hobby," and they'll have things that I can never dream of owning. You know what I mean? It's like they'll have setup. Like, what the? You know what I mean? It's like. Right, because they're very, very loaded. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh wow, I've got all this stuff, and I can do all these things, and I can create all this music. But you can't buy taste, and you can't buy the skills and the knowledge and the experience. And I think it's made it even more important for people like myself. I mean, I live in like just outside of Glasgow, and I work in my own studio. I work up in another studio, Dystopia. I work in another couple of studios from time to time. There is probably over 20 or 30 studios in Glasgow. There's 12, 13 music venues, like grassroots music venues, that are packed every single night with bands playing every single night. Every single studio is full. Everyone that I know that's producing or mixing is busy all the time. I'm like myself, I'm fortunate to be booked up now until like up into July or something like that. Like, people are making music, but they then realize that they can't quite take it that next step. And they almost get bogged down probably with this equipment that I was kind of saying it is great, because you've still got to know how to use it, and you've got to know how to use it tastefully, and have all the tools at your disposal, but know that actually maybe you only need 1% of it, and it's this 1%, and that's what will sound cool. So I think that's what it is. And also it's a human thing as well. Like, people are making music on their own, and then they're on their own. And it's like, we're human beings. We're not meant to be on our own. It's like, it's been the shit thing about COVID. And yeah, it's good that we can now do so much with technology, like talking to people like we are just now. But people are losing the ability to kind of interact socially and in real life with each other. And I think that's what bands love, and music goers love, and gig goers love, and they feel as if they're actually doing something and creating something with somebody. So I think that's what's so important. It's like what we're talking about earlier on when talking about going for drum lessons. It's like, you go for drum lessons, part of the fun of it is actually spending the time with the person and hanging out and having a laugh. But not just wasting your time. Like, you're having an experience of it. And it's better than the mundane shit of 9 to 5 going to work. You know what I mean? It's like, it's something special that as humans we're supposed to have. And there's nothing better than music for doing that, because you can do something without having to talk, or without having to have small talk, or like run out of things to say. You can say nothing all night and just make music, and still feel as if you've done that together. And it's a magical thing. So I think it's to go back to what you're saying. I think it's more important than it's ever been.
Yeah. So if people are making music in their bedrooms, or they're recording, and they're going to send you things to mix, what should they be careful about, and what should they, focus on, and how do you want to receive tracks from people?
It's trying to keep things as simple and clean as possible. That's something that I'm always having to tell people when you're getting things sent to you. People will have started experimenting themselves, and they'll be using compressors and EQs and things like that, and they don't know how to use them. And they'll print the tracks with it on it, and you're like, that, you've just ruined this. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always trying to get things back to their original form. And that's how I love hearing things. I love when, especially for rock and roll, it's like, you record the drums, you record the guitars, however many parts that is, your vocals, all your bass, your synths, any additional arrangement. It's like, put all that together, but in its basic form, and then allow the mixer to interpret that whatever you want, and you'll always get a better mix the cleaner and the more basic the tracks are. And that's not basic in terms of how much there is or how detailed the song is. It's just in what you've done to it. It's like, literally, I'm saying to bands when they're recording things and they're like, how do you want me to record this to give you? Do you want me to do this and clean it up and all that? It's like, no, press record and record it and press stop and then give me that. You know what I mean? It's like, give me that, don't do a thing to it. So that's how I always like it. The other thing is for people to put in time into pre-production. I think it's a big part of working with a producer, is teaching about pre-production and understanding that it's not just the process of recording a record and mixing a record afterwards that's important. It's all the work that goes in beforehand. You're one of the best examples I've ever had of that, Alan, where the records we worked on, you'd thought every single part of the song through, and you'd put demos together for everyone. You'd worked out the tempo maps. You'd get everything absolutely perfect, and then coming back and listening to the demo and coming to me and going, "There's still missing something here. There's a hook missing, or this song's not quite hitting. It needs to be lifted." And you weren't thinking about the big picture. It was the important things of the song, like, is this line rubbish that I'm singing? Should I replace that with something? Does that guitar really work here? It wasn't anything about how it sounded, because it doesn't matter. It's like bands will always say, "Oh, but it sounds rubbish," and it's like, well, don't worry, it won't. It'll sound great. But you can't make a bad song sound great. You know what I mean? It's like, it'll still be a bad song. It might just be a good sounding one. So it's like, always focus on getting the song as best as you can. Put all the effort into writing a great song and just recording it as clean as you can, and then we can make something amazing from that, always.
And what about bands who are coming in to record at the studio?
Mm-hmm.
What should they be kind of thinking about or focusing on?
Or avoiding?
Avoiding. Yeah. You would be amazed. Avoiding is coming in hammered. And fortunately seems to be that seems to be more a thing of the past. I think now back to the bands that I was in over the years, and the way that the mindset that you must have had, that you used to go into the studio just as you would go to a gig or you would go to rehearsals or whatever, and you'd be off your face all the time. You know what I mean? It's like, just the way it was. It was like, hey, party. And you're like spending money on this, and you didn't realise how much you're wasting other people's time. And like, you were going into a studio, and the engineers and the producers must have been like, I can't wait to get them out. You know what I mean? I now think, like, think back to those days and go, that must have been a nightmare for everybody involved. Because it's trying to be focused, and people don't have an endless pit of money. You don't have like Alan McGee saying to you, "Oh, well, you can go and record in the Bahamas for 6 months, you know what I mean, and we'll pay you for it." It's like, it's not going to happen. It's usually like, "Oh, well, you've got like 3 days to record an album," or something like that, you know what I mean? Sometimes you've got more luxury, but a lot of time people are under real pressures. It's like, how much do you charge a day, right? What can I get done in that day? You know what I mean? So if that's the case, and you know you've got a certain amount of time, it's like, be on it. Like, be going to that as if you're going to give it everything that you possibly could. Like, turn up and give your best performance that you possibly could, because you'll listen back to that and the record will outlive you. You know what I mean? It's like, all the records that you make will outlive all of us. You know what I mean? Yeah, people might not listen to them, or they might be listened to for decades. But those records will still exist and they'll outlive us all. They could be around forever, you know what I mean? It's like, that's something going right back to that whole Cambodian space project thing that I realised was, you were working on music and you were talking about music, that the people aren't there. The people from that that did that music aren't here anymore. The people that were listening to it, that got off on it, that was that whole scene at the time doesn't exist anymore. It was wiped out, you know what I mean? But it's still so important, and the music lives, and it does something for people further on down the line. And it's like, you never know who's going to hear your record 50, 60 years down the road, you know what I mean? So make sure it's the best thing that you possibly could have done, because it might be all that you've actually left. You might not have kids, you might not have anything, but you've got a record that somebody can hear in 100 years' time, you know what I mean? And it's like, so make sure it's good. Don't just turn up and be like, oh, right, I did that, kind of half-arsed. That's silly, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's what I always think is like, give your best, and so much of that is being prepared. You would not believe how many times singers will appear and they'll either be writing stuff down or they'll have their phone and they're like recording. It drives me mental when I see people singing. That happens all the time, like all the time.
What, people videoing themselves singing because they want to get the social media?
Reading
the lyrics. Oh, right.
The lyrics, and it's like everybody does it, and they've got their phone or their computer beside them or their iPad, and a piece of paper, and like singing, and you're reading, and you're like, how on earth can you be giving your best performance? How can you know those lyrics and feel them, and for them to be everything that they possibly could be, and for that to be the best performance you could ever do of that if you're still reading them, because you don't know them or you've just made them up, you know? And it's like,
if you're in a band, that shouldn't happen, because you've got one job. Yeah. I had to have some cheat sheets because I was playing the bass, the guitar, the keyboards, the singing, the backing vocals. I couldn't remember everything, so I needed the prompts. Yep. But if you're in a band and you're the singer, you should just be rocking up and smashing it in a couple of takes.
And that's an important thing to add as well, because yes, it's a very different situation how we made a record. And as I said, I make a lot of records like this with people. I love that, where you are making it up as you go along, because there's absolutely no way that you could do it any other way. It's like you've got these basic songs and you want to make something of that together, and you want this experience to be all about allowing these songs to blossom. As a band where the songs are defined but someone just isn't on it, and you can always tell, you know what I mean? You can always tell the drummer appears and he's completely off a time, can't do it to a metronome, you know what I mean? And you're like, well, how many times have you played this song? You know what I mean? And even if you use the excuse of, oh, well, we've only done it in rehearsals like 2 times, it's a new song, and you're like, well, if you knew you were coming into the studio, you should have gone into the studio 3 times a day for those last 2 weeks and got it absolutely perfect. Because again, it's that whole thing of always give it your best shot. And it amazes me how many bands these days, and especially the younger ones, and that's what I love. It's like every band that comes into the studio who are like 19, 20, 21, they've got every single part absolutely perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we can play this, and they do everything in like 1 or 2 takes. Amazing. And it's brilliant, because if you can do that, if you're doing a really complex thing, and say you're in for a couple of days and you're doing an EP or something like that, right? And say maybe you're doing 4 songs in 2 days, and there's a lot of stuff doing, lots of guitars, bass, drums, loads of vocals, and you know your parts, and the drummer has done it all in like 2 takes and it's perfect, then that means that that's taken a couple hours rather than a whole day. And you've then got like the rest of that day to experiment and experiment with sounds and make shit up, you know what I mean? And experiment with effects and things like that, and create something that's like groundbreaking, rather than just being finally the best version of that song that you could have done, you know what I mean? And so I think it's all about preparation, and I'm suddenly aware that a lot of bands watch this, have worked with me, and they'll be like, "Oh, that was me."
Now they know.
No, that's what you really think when you're giving it the thumbs up behind the screen. The other hand was giving it that little anger sign, going, "Oh,
Yeah, no.
your fucking lyric."
No. But it's good as well because I think that everyone knows it. Like, this is the thing, when you show your disappointment in something like that, you can see in the person that you're working with, you can see that they're like, I should have known this. You know what I mean? Because they're aware of it. So it's it's just a part of, again, making music with human beings. You know what I mean? Everybody's got their own way of working, but yeah, I like people to be super prepared, because I know that you can then get the best possible result that you can.
Just away from the studio, just sort of quickly, you got the best result. You've done the album, Jason. You've mixed and produced it, and it sounds fantastic. What do you think bands should be doing now? Because there's some. It's like, does it need to be on vinyl, or do you need to release it as an album on streaming, or should you release one track every month on streaming? Should you be out gigging every night? Should you focus on more recording? What do you think? Because it seems to me now that there's so much music being put out there, but no one's quite worked out the best way to promote it yet, or maybe they have, and I just haven't logged onto it. What do you think?
I still think, and it goes back to, this is where doing things the old school way is still the best, because you can become, unless you're one of the very, very, and people do make money out of this, and music's not about making money. It should never be about making money, but it also should, if you want to do it professionally and you want to not have to go and do a day job. And if you're a bunch of kids in a band and you're like, this is what we want to be, it's like, well, it's quite expensive living these days, you know what I mean? Even if you have a shit life, it's still expensive. It just is. Like, that's the way that the world is now. And it's like, if you want to spend your whole time being a musician, well, you've got to earn money from it. And I still think the best way is, yes, going out and gigging, because certainly over the last few years, you get paid decent now for gigging. If you're gigging a lot and you've got a good following, and the more that you play, more people will come and see you because you'll get better and you'll create a buzz, then you will start earning money from that, and you'll start earning a reputation from it. And then, without a doubt, the best way for bands to then succeed out of that from the recordings is through records, is through vinyl. Because especially in the kind of alternative music scene, people love buying records. It's like, records sell a lot just now. Like, I've seen stuff where it's quoting like record sales are now higher than they've been for about since like the early 90s or something like that. Record sales are huge at the moment, and they're also really expensive. It's like, and you don't even need necessarily a label. It's good if you've got a label, but a lot of labels will then take a huge amount of your money off you. So if you can have a good following where people are coming to watch you, and even if you were just playing the UK and doing the UK circuit and like traveling around the UK playing gigs and getting a following at all of them and taking records and selling them there, a record is like 20 quid at least. You know what I mean? It's like, people were getting like £25 for a record. And it's like, if you can make, say, 500 of them, right, and you sell them all for 20 quid each, there's 10 grand, right? Costs like £1,800 to print that, or £2,000 to print those. So there's £8 grand profit from selling 500 records.
Yeah.
If you're playing a lot of gigs and you've got a lot of people coming to see you, you'll sell 500 records very quickly. You know what I mean? So you can be like, oh well, as a band, if we could sell 1,000 records a year, then we're making 20 grand. You know what I mean? That's good. And then well, it's not, because as a band, that's not enough for you all to live on. But it's showing that it's not just this small thing that I think 10 years ago you were maybe stuck at because nobody was buying records. How did you make money from streaming? People were printing CDs and hoping that they would sell some CDs, but folk weren't wanting to spend much, and you'd end up going to gigs and giving them away because for some reason a CD felt like you could give them away. I remember always being in bands and you were giving people CDs, and it's like, why are we doing this? You know what I mean? Just where you felt almost like, I can't charge somebody for this. Whereas if you've got a record, you have to charge them. People feel as if they bought something that's quality and that went into. So I think people can do a lot of stuff themselves, but they've got, and again, it's that whole thing of having the right attitude and knowing that, right, well, we're going to rehearse all the time. We're going to get the best gigs that we can. We're going to get a following. Yes, you use the streaming's brilliant, but it's a complete fallacy to think that you can make money from streaming. It's not going to happen unless you're Taylor Swift. You're not going to make money from streaming, or some really wacky, bizarre thing that for some reason trends on TikTok. You know what I mean? It's like, as a band, you're not going to make money from TikTok. You know what I mean? It's like really quick, instant videos of quirky music. You know what I mean? Or something that kids are like, wow, this is great, because it's really quick and it's like a wee Instagram reel, you know what I mean? It's like, well, it's not going to, your average band is not going to make money from that. And people will say, oh, Spotify is a really bad thing, it's ruined the music industry. It's not at all. It's like the complete opposite, because you can put your music on there, and if you're gigging and you're selling records, but also in the meantime, you're being listened to by more and more and more people, then before you know it, there's folk all over the world listening to you. And those people will then pay to have your records sent out, you know what I mean? So you can sell them at gigs, you can sell them yourself, and that's without even having a record label. So it can all be done yourself. It's very, very rare that you're maybe going to get a deal off of a label. And if you do, then it should be worthwhile. You shouldn't just jump into it and be like, oh, wow, that's amazing, I'm going to sign this record deal, because it's not the 60s anymore. It's not like, oh, wow, we're the Doors, we've just been signed, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's like, usually if a label signs it, it's like, oh, great, we're going to make the money that you could be making yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, oh yeah, we'll print everything for you, and we'll sell it all, and we'll take 80%. And you go, what was the point of that? You know what I mean? Because none of them, very, very, very few record labels put if they're going to be taking 80% of your money, then they should be promoting you like nobody's business. They should have you on Radio 6 every day. They should have posters everywhere, billboards up, stuff all over the place, a team of social media people shouting about you every single day, that it actually makes only getting 20% worthwhile.
If you're enjoying this No Distance Records podcast, then why not check out our No Distance Records Release Radar playlist on Spotify and Apple Music. It features under-the-radar acts who have no more than 20,000 listeners or 100,000 plays of a song in their catalog. And if you're not enjoying this podcast, check out our playlist anyway.
I guess we're at a good spot now. We've kind of gone through your bit of a journey, haven't we, Jason? But Fuzzface Studios is new, isn't it? And it's all yours. So how did it all come about?
So really, this has kind of been my goal for a long time. When we were back in Asia, this was kind of my goal. When everything kind of ended with the band through very tragic circumstances, but it kind of put my girlfriend and I in this kind of crossroads, because we'd left the lives that we'd had in Amsterdam. Yeah, we were in bands and things like that, or I was in bands. But we also had day jobs, and like both of us were doing quite well, and like we had a nice life there, had great friends, who had a brilliant time there. It was awesome. But we left that, we gave it all up, and kind of thought we were going traveling for a year, but before you knew it, 7 years had passed. And we were completely out of society, like completely out of, you felt outside of that kind of normal social restrictions, which is cool. But you realise, because you feel like a kind of outsider, and you're like, this is awesome. I'm not a slave, man. You know what I mean? It's
No suit for me, man.
You're like, you're living your own rules, but there's only so long that's good. You know what I mean? And when things start going wrong, you realise that it's not a good situation to be in, because you've got absolutely no safety nets or anything. You don't have anything to fall back on. You don't have anything to call your own. Yeah, cool, the world's your oyster and all that shit, but there's only so long you can stay on the road for, and you kind of you want to do something else, you know what I mean? But without it being back to the mundane. So this was kind of our whole problem in our minds, was how do we get back to a life that's maybe a bit more like grounded, but not boring. And we're like, well, we just have to do what we love. Like, that's important. If we can do this, we've managed. And I think it was that whole thing of realizing, it was like, wait a minute, we've just survived for 7 years completely out of society, with nobody knowing where you are, with living on illegal visas in countries that you're not meant to be in for more than a few months, and you've been there for years, and you're surviving, you know what I mean? You're surviving, you're living a good life. It's like, so how's this been possible? And then you realise, well, we've done it ourselves. Like, you've relied on yourself. You've not. That's what you learned getting out of society, was that you can also do things for yourself. You don't have to be your handheld the whole time. So it's like, right, how can I go in there but take control myself? And that's really what we wanted. So girlfriend, she's really creative as well. She's like a product developer and fashion designer. That's what she's done all of her life. And she was like, I want to do this for myself. And I was like, well, I've always, like, this has been my passion. It's all I've ever done is music. It's all, like, ever since I left school, that's all that I've done. But never done it the way that I wanted to. And, like, without it feeling like it was a hobby, you know what I mean? Apart from when I very first left school, because I was a guitar teacher for like 6 years. So that's what I did when I left school. Did it very successfully, like had a lot of students, but even that wasn't doing something necessarily creative, you know what I mean? You were teaching, it was different. So yeah, I was just like, right, we're going to go back, have to make it work, that we can do what we want to do. And in my mind, I kind of thought that was like, I was loving producing more, and I was maybe thinking I'm going to have to work in a studio, which is cool, totally fine. And I wanted to do that. But I kind of knew, I was like, what I really want is my own place. I didn't know how much I really wanted it until I actually did it. And then we moved back to Scotland, managed to, fortunately, the way that things worked out in life, just went all in. And I was like, right, you can't be afraid of anything. And it's like, we gathered everything that we possibly could from our life in Amsterdam, owned a flat there. Fortunately, house prices in Amsterdam had gone up, and it was like, right, let's just take everything, put it into this idea, and just go for it. And it was like, left ourselves with nothing, like absolutely nothing. It was just like that. Let's try it. And we've had nothing before. We lived for 7 years out of a backpack, so it was like that, right? Well, we've came back and we've got all this stuff and all this like ability to maybe make something happen. Let's not fall into the same mistakes that we would have made before and try and just live comfortably. So it was like, no, fuck that. So put everything into it and built a studio. And it's just been amazing. It's like, ever since doing it, been busy since the day we opened. It's been great. I'm absolutely loving it. I still work a lot up in Dystopia Studios in Glasgow. And you and me worked there, Alan. I didn't have the studio at the time. And I love being up there. I was up there just last month. Actually, quite a lot at the end of last year, making an amazing record, a great record for a guy, James Michael Rogers, and his band, where we been wild. We ended up having like the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra playing on it, and all this kind of. I know it's an amazing record. It's a stunning record. We've put a lot of work into this, and myself and Luigi up in Dystopia kind of made that record happen. So I still love going to another place, but having my own setup's just amazing. And it's the ease, because it's like you go into another studio where there's other engineers working, there's other producers, and it just seems to be the way every single studio that I go into, everything gets taken down at night and then built back up in the morning for that session. And there's so much setup time and so much like set down time, like the same as if you were doing live sound and you're having to set up for a different gig every night and then pack up, and it's like that becomes tiring after a while. And I was like, I'm not doing that. No, I mean, I'm not 18. I don't want to do that anymore. And it's like something that I love about having my own place is you can have everything in your workflow in the way that you know. Yeah. And making it work for the bands that I love working with and the sounds that I love making. So when someone comes in, or a band comes in, or just an individual songwriter or whatever, we can be like, right, we want this sound, we want that, we want to do this, that, blah, blah, blah. And you can just move straight on and you can get so much done every single day. Whereas people are always like that, wow, you're like a slave driver, because it's like finish one thing and it's like right on to the next, and you don't have to be setting up, you don't have to be messing about. It's like, and as soon as you have an idea, you can turn around and make that idea into reality and go, I've got this sound in my head, and look around and right, I can use this and make that sound. And I absolutely love it. I love having that.
Is it like the two rooms? You've got like the drum room, haven't you? Or I guess guitars as well could possibly.
Yeah, I've got a live room and then the mixing room, and it feels just right. It's like, I mean, I work in a couple of big studios like Dystopia, and it's fantastic because you've got a huge big live room. So that's brilliant if you want to be tracking full bands or whatever. It's fantastic. But I also like the way that a smaller room sounds, and it's not small, just smaller, and everything's kind of on hand. I like the way that drums sound in small rooms because you can make drums sound bigger. If you can get a really good sounding room, then you can get that really tight 70s soul sound, or you can blow that up and make it sound massive. If you're starting off with a very big drum sound, you can't make that smaller, so you're always trying to create ways of making that smaller. You're getting gobos and putting them all around, like blocking off to try and make that big room small. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas you can take a tiny room and make yourself sound like John Bonham. You know what I mean? It's totally doable. So I love having that kind of flexibility. And yeah, it's two rooms now. I mean, God, you will have seen the space because it's right up. That's the other amazing thing about my studio is that it's behind my house. So I've got like 1 minute to go to work, you know what I mean? And I love that. I absolutely love it because I can't be bothered anymore, like traveling an hour and a half somewhere and then back. And it's like, that takes up a big chunk of your day. And
we did that for a week, didn't we? And it was it's hard going after a while. Because you're getting up early, you're getting back late, and then, yeah.
Totally, because especially when you're going and you're setting up and you're doing all these things, it's like they become massive days. And I like to put every single bit of energy you can into whatever you're recording that day or whatever you're mixing. And if you can take away all the other hassles, then it means that all your headspace is used for making that music. And I think that's a really important thing. And it's what I've noticed is really helping the work that I'm doing since I've opened here. I'm just like, wow, I'm just able to be so relaxed and just get into everything. And also I'm outside Glasgow, so you'll have seen that. I mean, we've got like a 45-minute train ride straight to Glasgow, and that's nice for bands because they're used to going into like industrial estates or or busy built up parts of town, and they come down here and they've got like the sea a street away and forest behind us and like one local pub, and it's it's brilliant. It's like folk love it. They're like, wow, this is great. It's like an escape. Whereas we were doing the opposite because you were staying with me and we were
I was staying with you, but we were going into the city.
So all the bands now do it the other way around, and everyone seems to love it.
Well, I know you said you're booked up for the next few months. You got lots on, but if people do want to contact you, what's the best way to go about it? We're going to obviously put any details that you want in links and all that kind of stuff, but is your Instagram handle, that stuff?
Easiest way, either through Instagram or Facebook or my website. So the studio's got a website, and there's like a contact page on that, and yeah, they can get to us that way. I'm always kind of booking ahead, because that's also, I think people when they're creating something, I like being this busy, because it means that if you're booking things in for like 4 or 5 months' time, it almost goes back to what we were talking earlier on. It means that people will wait that long. First of all, if people will wait that long, it means that they want to work with you. They're not just working with you because you're available. It's like if someone's going to wait 4 months, then they must really want to work with you. And that's important, because if you're going to be like investing all your time into each other, it has to be for a reason, not just because it's handy. You know what I mean? So they must like the music that I'm doing, and I must like the music that they're doing. So it's worth waiting for. But it also forces people into that situation where they have to prepare. And they've got the time. It's like, right, you've now got this time. Don't screw about. Like, use this time. And this means that we can do something even better. I kind of like that. I like to know that you're busy for the next few months and then be planning things. So I'm just now, if that's anyone that's getting in touch, I'm kind of planning things for the summer now. So yeah, that's cool.
Well, I mean, if you want to have a listen to, the kind of stuff Jason does, we've got a fantastic playlist he's done. There's a great song, Loose Ends by Ayrshire, which really was sounded like Jesus and the Mary Chain vibes to me. And then there was a great one, I Found a Reason by The Gospel?
The Gospel, yeah.
That was that was like a kind of 80s Leonard Cohen kind of big sound. It was so different. I thought that was, I love listening to that. Get the headphones on for that track, man, because it is like,
it's amazing.
It's really great, really great. It's low and Easy Peelers, which we flagged up on. We put them in our top 10, did we, last year, Alan, for NDR, an Easy Peeler track, because we think that.
I think we did. Yeah, I had a look through the playlist today, and there's been several that we've kind of showcased on our weekly playlist. I went to go through and thought, I'm going to find my favourite 2 or 3 tracks from this, and it just got. I couldn't decide. I got it down to about 9, I think.
There's some seriously good tunes. So thanks for doing that, Jason. Really appreciate it, and thanks very much for this chat. I mean, obviously, I saw it the other side, Alan telling me what you were telling him to do. And then when I was going in and I did my record, which I didn't do with Jason, but Alan was saying, make sure you plan it out and you do your tempo and all this. I was like, yeah, whatever. And he was like, no, you got to do it. And he was completely right, obviously. So you're very much the Jedi Master to Alan there.
Well, some of your demos you were sending me to kind of mix your demos. Yeah, I was like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do
that. Alan had learned. So you're
Jason sitting on your shoulder.
Exactly. You're a big hero to us here. So thanks so much, Jason, mate. Really, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you guys as well, really, and thank you for everything that you're doing, promoting bands as well. That's so important. Because it is, I mean, the bands are able to do things themselves, but it really helps when people that just love music are shouting about them and sharing their music, because it's a great time just now for music. There's lots of exciting stuff out there. It's just we need people to kind of make sure that people hear it above the noise of everything else.
You're listening to a No Distance Records podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow to get updates on releases, events, and other things we've not even thought of yet.
Well, I thought that was a really interesting interview. I mean, how positive is Jason, man? Like, a lot of people get down about the music industry and Spotify and stuff, but he was just like, this is the best time for rock and roll. And you don't hear that from a lot of people. So I'm actually feel genuinely like in a better mood now from having spoken to him.
Yeah. But that's who you want making your records.
Oh, yes.
That enthusiasm and someone who just loves music.
Yeah, and he he knows. Obviously, you could tell that he knows what he's talking about. But he was just had. I mean, you've worked with him, right? And you did a documentary, right? You took your video camera along, whatever the hell you used, and you.
I did, yes. If you check out my Dr. Pill page on YouTube, I just left my phone up, randomly switching on and off, and recorded it. And we've got some really great moments. So you'll see us kind of working stuff out together, having fun, kind of testing out different amps and mics and guitars. I took all the boring stuff out, but you'll get to see a day in the life of what it's like to work with Jason, and it is easy. And like you said, as long as you're prepared, he will,
excellent stuff.
We'll push you along and add so much to music. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we'll put the links. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see the links down there. If you're listening to it on whatever podcast streaming, then check out on Instagram at No Distance Records, or go to nodistancerecords.co.uk, and it's all there. And make sure you do all the tedious stuff that, subscribe and like and all that nonsense which people are on about. But thanks for listening. And thanks very much, Jason.